Dave, Josh, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm super excited that you're both here. This is the first kind of duo interview of season 2, and I'm very excited for it. It won't be the last, so thank you for being trendsetters. But before we get into the reason that you're both here and the interesting work that you and your team are doing right now, we're going to start this interview with the most important question. And I ask all of my guests this question. I'll ask you both individually, but just as a heads up, it sets a bit of a tone for the rest of the interview. It's also the question that our listeners want an answer to. So Dave, we'll start with you. When it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
Here's how I feel about pizza and how I feel about life in general. Okay. If that's the way you like it, that's the way you should have it.
Okay, that's amazing.
So but I love pineapple on pizza.
There we go. Okay.
I think we should experiment and everybody should go do their own pizzas.
Okay. Josh, what about you, man?
So I have the same philosophy of pizza as Dave, and I think I like pineapple on pizza like once in every like 1,000 pies. I like it. It's not my go-to very often.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I don't think I haven't met somebody yet where it's like their default pizza, but as long as you're open to it, and it sounds like you guys are, so I'm happy you're on the right side. We're in the slight majority right now of pro pineapple, so our listeners are on board. It's a great start. Let's get to know you guys a bit better. So Josh, we'll go to you first now. Give us a little bit of background. Who are you and what are you doing for work right now?
Sure. So I'm a middle school teacher at Salisbury Middle School in Pennsylvania. And for the past few years, really, Dave can share his own perspective on this, but we've both been working on this learner-centered competency-based school within a school called Project Wonder. So that's been the majority of our time. We also have some other responsibilities in the school. For me, it's gifted. I'm the gifted support teacher at the middle school. So between those two things, it's been the majority of my time and energy has gone into that as far as work goes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Dave, what about you?
My name is David Byer. I teach at Salisbury Middle School too. And I just noticed that Josh said Salisbury. I've been teaching at that school for 15 years and I'm still not sure how to pronounce it. So Salisbury, whatever. And I was teaching 6th grade science and reading before we put together the school within a school. So I think that I have been talking with the principal and the superintendent and everybody about leaving our comfort zones. And I feel like I'm known among those who I work with for being somebody who's only comfortable when he's outside his comfort zone. So this risk of jumping into a learner-centered classroom was exactly my cup of tea. And it's been 3 years and we're building it up as we go.
That's fantastic, guys. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited that you're both here to talk about that. We'll touch on it a little bit today, but what I'm hoping we can do is, invite your other colleague and we'll come back and we'll do a kind of a longer format episode for season 3. We can do a deep dive on exactly what the school is. But I want to touch on one thing you just said, Dave, and I'm super happy you said it, was that word risk, because one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast, especially in season 1, was this idea of failure and how in the traditional education system, it's not necessarily set up to incentivize failure, right? How do you explain that to your students? So like, hey, we're setting up this new school. It may work, it may not. Like, what was that conversation like?
Well, so I love that you said the word failure, because that's one of the things that we sell the parents on because we have to recruit students, is the idea that that students have time to struggle and to fail and to learn from those failures. And one of the things that we say in the classroom all the time is that we need to celebrate our failures. So that's part of our philosophy that we make visible to the students all the time. And when they get to a point where they have a decision to make about, can I continue along this path, or have I reached a point where I can't do anymore? We help them, make those decisions and try to work towards getting them to internalize that, so that failure is part of their process of learning all through school. This is the time, more than any other time in your life where risk and failure has no consequences. So we want them to develop those skills now before later in life where they're learning bigger things, that it becomes something that they're comfortable with.
Thank you for doing that. I hope this becomes the norm, right? Have either of you heard of something called the fear setting exercise by Tim Ferriss?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, definitely Google it afterwards. I've talked about it a bajillion times on this podcast. It's, I think it's been turned into a TED Talk, like 13 minutes. And it's a great way to introduce the idea to students where you just, if you're talking about a certain thing, list out all the worst possible scenarios, what would happen if that happened. And usually they end up realizing it's really not all that bad. And if it is, here's the alternative, right? So Josh, different question for you about the school though. So you've been there from the get-go. We said we've been going for 3 years. Why start this school, right? Like this isn't your first teaching position. So what, and I know it wasn't just you, right? It's a whole team, but what was the impetus maybe that led to your district or school saying this needs to happen?
So there was a district-wide push to move into a new learning model for the 21st century that really met each learner where they were and gave them the skills they need to really be successful in their life beyond school. So that resulted in the district creating this vision in the form of learning beliefs and a profile of a graduate. And it's been difficult, I think, on the district level to kind of create that change because school systems are so complicated. And, if you move one piece out of alignment, it's either going to kind of snap off and disappear, or it's just going to get pulled back into make sure it works with the rest of the system. So it's really hard to change anything.
Right.
And when I got hired at Salisbury, our principal, Ken Parliament, he decided, maybe this is the opportunity to get started. Dave was already, he's, like he said, he's a risk taker. He's willing to kind of jump into new things. So Ken paired up Dave and I and said, try out the school within a school. Let's see if we can kind of on the small scale, figure out how we can make our district's vision work. And so, the goal I think eventually is to grow out this model. It'll change over time as more teachers get involved. It's always evolving, but that's kind of how it all got started.
That's super interesting. And, you talked about a couple of things that you said goal, and we just talked about failure before. Have you talked about a team? I know it's ever evolving, but have you defined what success could look like, right? Like, is there a metric that we're reaching towards, or are we just kind of evaluating this ongoing and seeing if it's headed in the right direction?
I think it's different metrics as we, there are different checkpoints along the way. So I think the first checkpoint was to get sort of a sustainable model, a model where we know that as long as we have the teachers to take on more students, we can build that capacity. I think the first couple of years, it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of error for sure. And I think we've just now gotten it to a point this year where it's really sustainable and we can grow. So that was the first checkpoint. I think the next, I don't know. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Josh is right in that our goalposts are constantly moving, but we do have a foundation, if I can mix metaphors. We do have a foundation of the profile of a graduate was something created for the school district and has habits of mind and competencies all laid out. And we started with that as a starting point for our school. And so we have that as a, as a touchstone as a third metaphor that we always refer back to and say, well, are we going in the right direction with that? So we've tried a bunch of different things, and we make this visible to the students too, that this is a learning process for us too. And as you go, we're going to tell you our failures and tell you how we're going to try to address those and get input from you on that. So we've actually had, in 3 years, we've had 3 different grading systems as we're trying to de-emphasize grading and emphasize growth.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult with a select set of students to have them relax about grades. Just don't worry about your grades. At the end of the marking period, we have a conference with them about where they think they should be. Everything's going to work out. I want you to focus on your growth. Some just like some teachers are ready for change, some students are more ready than others.
Right.
And we're always pulling them towards their growth, and that's reflected and informed by the profile of a graduate. So that's our starting point.
That's super cool. Yeah, what a great, obviously we all understand the importance of representation for young people, visual representation, but I don't think something we don't talk about enough is character representation. So for them to actually able to see and hear the words that are coming in your mouth right now, that like, this is an experiment, we're not exactly sure how it's going to work out, but we're going to learn along the way. That's super important. So I'm super happy that you guys are doing this. And just so in case anyone listening isn't familiar with the profile of a graduate, let me take a stab at it and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong and maybe shed some light on how it's unique to your district So from what I understand, it's becoming more and more popular, which I love, is that actually the first time I heard about it was at a conference, and it was an administrator school, and I want to say North Dakota. And they were having a conversation with someone in their town in industry, and industry was basically saying, look, you know, your students are great, they're graduating, they're really great at writing essays, but they may not necessarily have these core competencies that we need for them to interact with the customer and to be the employee that we need them to be successful here, right? So kind of they went back and they surveyed the town and the parents and the community and said, what would you want a grade 12? What traits, what characteristics would you want them to be able to display evidence of and be competent with as they're graduating? So oftentimes you'll hear districts referred to as, you know, their 6 C's or their 5 C's or something like that. You know, your competencies that we're talking about all the time: curiosity, collaboration, communication, that kind of thing. So was I close? And maybe what does that look like for Salisbury?
Very much so. We basically have it's four really big posters, and it's very comprehensive, but it was developed exactly in the way that you talk about, with the community, with teachers, with students, with parents, all the stakeholders getting involved and coming up with a vision for what a graduate should be able to do. And that covers everything from, as you said, the habits of mind, curiosity, compassion, tolerance, acceptance, all those things, to what exactly should they be able to do. And they should be ready for a global marketplace and all that sort of thing. What you described is a fabulous description of our profile of a graduate. And I think that our community's collaboration reflects what businesses across the country are looking for, which is, you know, people who are adaptable learners. And that's, I think, the heart of our program and of the profile of a graduate.
Super cool. Okay, Josh, one more question, then we'll get into the meat of everything that I told you guys we're going to talk about. This is just so interesting to me, so I'm super happy you guys made time for this. So all this is great, right? We have our habits, we have our curiosity. This is what we want our students to develop, and it's fun to talk about. But how do they actually show it? It's like at a granular level. I'm graduating. I'm grade 12. Is there a physical profile that I have, or like what does that actually look like for anyone who's less familiar with this?
So that's something that our district is actually working on right now. Our director of curriculum just sent out, you know, some sort of surveys to teachers, to parents, to students, to kind of get a sense of what they think the best way to do this would be. Right now, the plan is to do a portfolio, I believe, where they'll have, you know, evidence of all of these things. So that's, you know, in the works. And then, you know, in our school, within a school, we want to do something similar. So this year will be the first year that we have sort of portfolio presentations at the end of the school year. You know, I'm sure it'll change from this first iteration as things always do. But yeah, it's kind of new for the district and for the school within a school. And that's something we're super excited about.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. I could talk about portfolios all day long. So I'm happy that those words came out of your mouth. And it'd be really interesting too. You know, we talk about learning and growing as the adults, building out the school, for you guys to have your own portfolios to document experience and the growth and reflect on what worked and what didn't. Also, is just a great representation to show students, look, we're doing it too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool, guys. Let's get into the questions. So let's do this individually. Dave, we'll start with you, right? So season 1 of this podcast was talking to industry, CEOs, hiring managers, people, asking them what 21st century skills, what are those competencies that they're looking for when they're hiring and building out these 21st century teams, and what do those skills look like on display? Because, you know, it's really easy to tell our students, hey, this is our graduate profile, you need to be collaborator, but what does it actually look like in the workplace, right? So we've collected a fair number of those responses that we're at the point where now we're ready to talk to educators like both of you to highlight some of the amazing ways that you are working with your students to develop these skills in the classroom, because there's so many amazing stories. Like I'm privileged to be able to work with educators across North America, and I hear these stories. I feel like they're just not being yelled loud enough. So that's what I'm trying to do with season 2, so that someone listening to this podcast on their drive into the school can hear your example, borrow, steal it, and bring it back to their classroom. So Dave, what's something that you've done over the years with your students in the class to help develop one of these 21st century skills?
All right. Now I have to confess, Josh and I cheated and came up with an answer together.
That works. That's great.
All right. Yeah. So what we focused on, because, you know, we're lucky that we're getting to reform our day around the profile of a graduate. But there are a lot of things that I know within one class period, you may not be able to, you know, to learn from what we're doing. But there are some things in there, like the agenda that we set at the beginning of our day. Every student has, rather than classes, you go to social studies, then you go to math. We have a set of learning targets that we've set aside. They can bring their passions into the classroom, so that if there's something that they really want to work on, but we'll find a way to connect that to some learning targets. But it all starts with that agenda, which is where they think about what they want to do that day, and make a plan for themselves. And we take a look at it and make suggestions sometimes. Well, it's been a while since you've worked on math, etc. But they start by planning out their day, and they begin the practice of looking at, well, what do I need to do, and what's right for me, and where are my priorities at the beginning of every single day. So that's something that I think translates to, a single class period anywhere, is just taking time to say, where am I right now, and what do I need to accomplish, and what do I really want to accomplish? And that, is made manifest by the agenda.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot there. I mean, there's prioritization, right? Students being able on their, talk about student choice, right? Being able to make the decisions for themselves, but then also being able to understand that it's going to be important, that they're going to have to prioritize what's most important, and probably be able to make a connection to some of those learning targets or the goals you spoke to before, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if there's something that they're really passionate about, we throw the, learning targets aside and say, we want you to pursue that. And then it's our job to connect it wherever we can. So, so their day becomes as engaging as possible. And we make sure that they're, that the educational component, we'll figure that out.
Yeah. And, you guys talked about it before, but change is hard for anybody, definitely teachers, but students as well, right? For students who are coming to this and it's a new environment, is there any way you've kind of prefaced this, that, hey, this is going to be a little bit different, but this is why we're doing it, and these are the types of competencies that, by being able to set your own agenda, that these are the skills you are developing? Like it's becoming more and more popular, which I love, for teachers to be very visible in explaining these are the outcomes, or these are the standards, or the learning targets that we're working towards, and this is why. Are you doing anything like that to kind of explain why this is different than the traditional class for them?
So I think, we've been working on, as the school within school has changed, we've had to kind of change our elevator pitch and make sure we're really representing it clearly and, concisely. So I think where we're at right now is that, when parents ask, when students ask, we say this is fully personalized, right? So we're aiming for the profile of a graduate, but your child or you as a student are going to get the support you need. So for the agenda, for example, some students in 6th grade are ready to come in and sit down with a blank piece of paper and say, here's what I'm going to do today. And, it looks great. Other students, they're oftentimes, I think they have the skills, but they're just a little intimidated by that. So we have different ways to help them out. We can have some preset agendas for the day, like maybe for this block of time, you work on social studies. And that's really sort of just an example of this fully personalized system we're trying to make work. And I think we finally have in our 3rd year.
Yeah, I think you guys are definitely headed in the right direction, right? So actually, you've both done such a good job that you've both been promoted to superintendent for the next 10 minutes, right? So Dave, congrats, but you're already tasked now. So you have to decide. You have this profile of a graduate, which is wonderful. But for this question, you have to pick one. And it doesn't have to come from your profile, right? But as the superintendent, you've been tasked with deciding one of these skills that every one of your grade 12s have to display evidence of in order to graduate. Which one are you picking?
Okay, so actually what I'm going to do is take the whole profile of a graduate and throw it all together and summarize it. And I would say that what we're going to focus on is making sure everyone understands the process of learning. How do you learn? And when a graduate leaves the school district, they should be able to tell whoever asked them, here's how I begin diving into a new skill. And if they can lay out, here's how I'm going to go about it, and do it, then we're successful as a district. So that's what I would want everyone to demonstrate in class.
That's such a good answer. I mean, the process of learning and unlearning is, so important with all these new technologies that are coming into our lives, that, yeah, if I can show my potential employer that here's my actual process for learning a new skill, I can't hire you expecting you're going to know everything on day one, right? You hire for personality and you can train for skill. So if I can feel confident that I'm going to be able to coach and train you, and you can show me how you're going to develop those skills, then you're going to put yourself ahead of a lot of other applicants, right? Josh, what about you? You can pick one skill. Which one are you picking?
So I think, kind of connected to what Dave is saying with sort of metacognition, I think self-reflection, just the ability to, and this goes into setting agendas, this goes into all the decisions that our learners make throughout the day. It's, why this, why that, why would I do it this way? And that ability and that habit of self-reflection, I think would really change the world right on the large scale. And I think it has the ability to really change the lives of our learners who start to ask that question.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about, hands down. Yeah, self-reflection, and why I think something like a digital portfolio is so crucial and critical to the success of an initiative like this, or really anything in general. So great answers, guys. Let's do a few more rapid fires. Dave, what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but maybe that you wish that you were?
I'm gonna. All right, the quick version is understanding your emotions.
Yep.
That's something that I only became aware of as an adult, and I wish we had talked about when I was younger.
100%. And it'd be a lot easier when you're doing the self-reflective activities that Josh just talked about, right? And
yep.
So Josh, life skill?
I would say self-advocacy. I think, as a student, every student has so many ideas of what they want to do, what they need to do. And I think that's not necessarily cultivated just because there isn't the space in the school day to do so. So that would be mine.
That's a great answer. Okay. Put you back on the spot, Josh. You have a billboard now, and everyone's going to see this big billboard. You can write one thing on it. What does it say?
So going back to the self-reflection piece, I think it would just say why with a question mark. Just why, why, again, going back to that, how do you make decisions? Why do you make the decisions you make?
Yeah, that's a fantastic. There's a book that I'm listening to right now that's a very top of mind. It's from this author. His name's Adam Grant, and I think the book is called Think Again, and it's all about rethinking and learning and unlearning. And yeah, the question is not just great for self-reflection, why it's huge for that, but it's curiosity, which is such an important skill. If you just learn to question everything and get to the core of why someone believes the way they feel, why they feel the way they feel, you're going to do a much better job of trying to hear them out and empathize with them, which is so important. Dave, what about you? You got a billboard. What does it say?
Yeah, I've got a quote from Walt Whitman via Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. It was in the last episode of the show, and I thought, man, that is fantastic, because it's about understanding and not not placing judgment before you really learn. And this is about people and about places and everything. It's just such a great philosophy that it's sticking in my head. And that's what would go on the billboard for sure.
All right, I love that. Ted Lasso keeps coming up for me, so that's something I'm gonna.
It's amazing. It's such a great antidote for toxic masculinity. I love that show. Yeah, Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm a fan of this. All right. Okay, we're just talking about books. What's a book that you read that's had such an impact in your life that maybe you would have wished you read it at a younger age?
All right. So the quickest answer that I can give, and it's not super fast, is that I went back to school to become a teacher in my early 30s. Mm-hmm. And I took a children's literature class. Mm-hmm. And I read 3 books that I had never read that absolutely blew my mind. Holes and Bridge to Terabithia and oh my gosh, the one about leadership. It's a sci-fi.
Okay. Ender's Game? No.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I did read Ender's Game as a child. That's cool. You're going to have to come back to me because I've forgotten and now I need to cheat.
Luckily, you have a co-host here with you.
I've got the compendium of all knowledge right here at my fingertips.
Yes. Josh, what's your book? It's had such an impact that you wish you would have read it at a younger age.
I think, man, there are so many books I wish I had read when I was younger, but yeah. I think the one that's coming up for me is Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. Just the concept of putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and understanding, going back to the beginning with risk, right? Part of life is feeling sort of that discomfort. And if you don't embrace it, you're going to end up trying to run away from it and protect yourself, and you're going to miss out on most of what life has to offer. So that's a book that helps me. And I think it's something that I try to bring to my students too, not the book itself, but just the idea of it.
Yeah, the takeaways. That's amazing. I mean, looking forward to end of the seasons doing recaps, because I'm asking a lot of similar questions from episode to episode, and that book and Brené Brown are probably going to make up the majority of the pie chart for answers to that question. So good answer. Did you figure it out, Dave?
A Wrinkle in Time. I can't believe I
There we
forgot
go.
the name of the book.
Okay.
But again, that's one that when I read books like Brene Brown's a great example. Books that I have discovered as an adult that are powerful to me. Even more powerful is when I read it in science fiction, and the message is carried in a metaphor. That's what it really hits home for me, and that's Wrinkle in Time, and her struggle with being a leader was wonderful for me.
Yeah, great answer. Okay, guys, let's wrap this up with one final question. And you guys may be biased because maybe you're already doing it with your student-centered, competency-based school within a school. But Josh, I'll start with you, man. So you have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the education system as it exists today. What are you changing?
I would remove grade levels, because I think if you remove grade levels, it completely breaks the system, right? The system is built around sort of this social progression through the grades. And I think if you get rid of that, you open it up to competency-based, you open it up to every child actually getting what they need. So I think that would be it.
It's a great answer, and it's one that's come up a few times. Yeah. So is it in your scenario moving towards more of something like a proficiency or mastery-based progression, or once you've displayed competency of this thing, we can move forward? It's not based on when you were born type of thing?
Yeah, we have some 6th graders working on 8th and 9th grade math. We have,
right,
students all over the map, right? Just working on whatever is clicking with them right now. So we ultimately, in our school system still have the sort of standard graduation age, but we're trying to break that down as much as possible. And, again, make the school within a school work within an existing system.
Very cool. Yeah. Dave, magic wand.
I'm going to take one word off of Josh's answer: grade levels, and I'm going to get rid of grades, and we're going to assess students' readiness to move to the next, to the next thing on the list, and never give them a 97 or an 82, or crush their self-esteem, or cause them to stay up at night stressing out. Like, get rid of grades completely and never talk about them.
Preach, man. You know what? I'm not going to go on a rant because I just went on a rant for the last guest. It's a big thing that I've been talking about lately. I just picked up this book on grading. If there's teachers going gradeless, there's whole communities on Twitter. So I was going to say, if those didn't exist, maybe I'd start a podcast just talk about that. But I still might. Maybe we'll have a whole season, because I think that a lot of teachers are now starting to understand everything that you guys just talked about, and everything Dave you just talked about, especially with the stress and anxiety. But for people who are removed from the education system, people who maybe haven't thought about it since they graduated, that's such a weird concept. Like, what do you mean remove grades? The grades have always been there, right? So I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen, probably for the parent and just general community outside of education as well. And maybe I'll tackle that angle from it. Okay, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for making time, like I said, and I think it came out in the questions that I asked. I'm super interested and curious and excited about what your team is doing. I hope this just blows up and this becomes the norm. And I'm looking forward to connecting again. Hopefully sometime in May, we'll do kind of a deep dive on the ins and outs, because I'm sure people listening to this have some follow-up questions. So gentlemen, thank you very much. Where can, if I am listening to this, I don't want to wait for that next episode. Is there anywhere I can go to learn a bit more about kind of the school within a school and what you guys are up to?
So I think the school within a school, the best way to learn about that is probably contacting either of us directly, and we can send you links to our, kind of in-house website and everything. So, on Twitter, it's just Josh Ecker, all one word. Dave, how about you? What's the best way?
Yeah, I'm at David M. Beyer on Twitter. We do have a Project Wonder website that kind of lays out our philosophy and our mission statement, but we're not, it's long. It's sites.google.com, so blah, 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 blah. So yeah, hit us up on Twitter and we'll send you there.
Okay, guys, that's so awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. Have a fantastic week and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Damien. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you. We're looking forward to the next one.